Hey guys, I had a video a little while back that I was working on. It was addressing some problems with evolution. Someone had sent me a message saying, hey, these are the reasons why evolution is completely wrong, and I ended up doing a video. Well, I ended up starting a video that was kind of addressing some of those things. It went a little bit long, but I think I really started to address the majority of it. It kind of cuts off towards the end. I didn't really get a chance to finish it very well, but I'd hate to see all that work go to waste. So I decided I'd go ahead and post it here. So this is me addressing the other side and trying to answer some of the most common questions that we see in regards to evolution. Have a look.
Today we're going to discuss evolution. Let's get into this. I'm Mike, and this is the other side. So, a little while back, I had a friend who sent me a posting from one of her friends that was obviously an evolution denialist. Uh, this comes to be one of those subjects where I don't really see the other side, but we can at least address what the other side is saying, what the other side is thinking, and look at some of those concerns, some of those thoughts, go into what really the answers are to some of these things. So let's get right into it. So here we can see the statement that was made. I'm not going to sit here and read the whole thing because we're about to break this down bit by bit. This argument starts, as most of these like this do, Darwinism is a theory. So let's start with the basics. Honestly, I thought this subject had been covered so much in various memes, stories, articles, YouTube debates that I didn't even think that I'd still continue to hear this argument today. But since it is still being used, let's go back to the basics. Common man uses the term theory as if to say a thought, an idea, an unproven philosophy. The theory of evolution, however, is not using this term as a common man does or as the layman does. Rather, it's using it in the scientific sense. You see, a theory is an explanation or model based on observation, experimentation, and reasoning, especially one that has been tested and confirmed as a general principle helping to explain and predict natural phenomena. In short, a theory in science is under more scrutiny than what most people consider fact in a normal day-to-day basis. When a common person says theory, what they're thinking of in science is a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a part of getting to a theory, but it's not the same thing. It's like saying the theory of gravity is in question, when in all reality, it's not. Evolution has so many holes that an inevitable obsession for missing links is as strong a faith than any other religion. Actually, the primary difference between science, or evolution, and religion is that science requires fact, whereas religion simply requires belief. And I'm sure I'll go into this part again, but let's quickly address missing links. To begin, back in the 80s when we had this idea of the missing link, aka Bigfoot, that was thought should exist as an evolutionary step between chimps and humans. However, it's most likely that if such a stepping stone did exist, it either evolved out of existence or was unable to survive the changing times as well as the other two, that is, humans and apes. What is actually meant by missing links are the fossil or bone records that connect humans to earlier primates. The misnomer behind this, however, is that there really aren't any missing links. We have found substantial fossil evidence of earlier species. As you can see here, we have found them time and time again. There's in fact so much supporting evidence that this should be the end of the debate right here. But I know it's not, so let's continue on. Let's see. Creation and evolution are separate things. So there I have a point of agreeing on this point. Creation and evolution are separate things. Again, then goes on to say, one cites God as the creator of life. Evolution is only a theory of changes to existing life. Okay, again, I feel here we're using theory in layman terms, not scientific terms. Where the words are true, the meaning used behind these words make a completely different statement. Where I don't dispute this point, I'd say it's more like one simply is the belief that God created everything, whereas evolution is the observation from a scientific and skeptical point of view to prove a fact that life has changed over the span of millions of years. It is true that evolution's primary focus isn't addressed in the actual creation of life, but there is an aspect to it that does become addressed. Many people join the idea that God created life and then continued to evolve from that point on. Unfortunately, that's not the case in this argument, which is trying to state that evolution is faulty as a theory, or because it's a theory, and that it doesn't clearly hold a candle to the facts behind creationism. So we're going to continue to address that issue. And we're going to combine two of the statements here. So, yes, it wouldn't be a conflict at all for one to believe that God created life as well as changes to life over millions or whatever of years. And noted here, for argument's sake, we'll just agree with this for the moment. The problem is that evolution isn't taught as being different from creation, but rather as a replacement of creation. As we both know, evolutionary theory has no valid explanation of how life started. It just does. Some prebiotic soup magically morphed to the very first living cells. Okay, to begin, it's not a problem. In science class, we're taught science theory and philosophy. In church, you're taught religious belief. I don't understand why not teaching religious belief in a science class is an issue, but let's address the crux of the issue here. Science has no valid explanation of how life started. This is a huge argument that creations hang on because the science has not been able to fully conclude on the matter. And truly, it hasn't. However, this is not evidence against science. The problem isn't that there aren't any viable explanations, but rather, the problem is that there are too many theories. There are too many viable explanations, and it's difficult to narrow down exactly which one is responsible. The many theories hypothesis of origin of life have been proposed, but since it's hard to prove or disprove them, no fully accepted theory exists. Because of this, science still maintains a relevant argument for the creation of life. To simply say, God said so, is not something to be taught in a science course. For that matter, we don't teach evolution in the church. Humans have breeded, I'm sure that meant to say bred, dogs for centuries, if not thousands of years. Yet they are all still dogs. I don't think any turned into felines, and that is the hand of intelligent human design at work. And a chimp turning into a human does not turn into a feline either. Of course, what's being addressed here is how animals went from, say, fish to human. What first needs to be addressed here is that a person's lack of understanding of the subject is not proof against said subject. Just because you don't understand something does not mean it's wrong. The fact is, there are multiple species that don't fall cleanly into classification, platypus being a great example, as are a couple of others right here. This is a further argument in favor of evolution, as that's what happens. Different animals slowly change into other things, and some of those animals are those evidences. The physical traits change over a long, slow period of time that it wouldn't be noticeable in a human life. As much as we understand the evolution process, we're still learning greater details on how a person could have gone from a fish to what we have today. But there's reason these fields are studied for years before they're understood by their professions. These explanations aren't short sound bites that will explain everything in a clear and concise manner. You have to be able to understand how DNA and RNA change over time. You have to understand the properties of genetic traits to include recessive and dominant traits. You have to understand biology at a microscopic level. There's a lot of science that goes into understanding of evolution that takes years of study to be able to come up with the full and rounded out facts that they have found to this day. Keep in mind, a fact isn't a fact. A theory doesn't just become a theory without being analyzed by several different sources. These aren't just arbitrarily pitched out and then everyone just says, yeah, sure, that sounds good enough. But the fact that these details aren't easy to simplify for the layman, again, doesn't mean they're wrong. It is right, though, that where people crossbreed dogs isn't a perfect example of evolution. It does help to show a little bit of the process to help with the understanding. The fact that dogs can be bred by intelligent beings is not evidence that all evolution has to be done through intelligent design. That's taking the wrong lesson from the example. And yes, it's not going to be bred into a cat, but let's say you crossbreed a dog with some other kind of species, over time, eventually, it can become a completely different type of animal. Hell, give us some time, we may even find a way to crossbreed a dog into a cat at some point. But that's a completely different subject and totally beside the point of what we're addressing right now. He then goes on to say, but evolutionary theory does not have that luxury. Rather than a breeding of sorts, evolutionary theory depends greatly on random mutation and natural selection. And this is a second reason why evolutionists purport that millions of years are necessary, because no scientific basis exists of life coming from nothing. Let's throw years at it, and species morphing into another species. Again, let's solve it by throwing years at it. So I hear this argument for all kinds of different things. Carbon dating, evolution, the creation of everything. Time is a cop-out. Time is just a random excuse so that we can explain everything. And for some reason, the idea that things take a matter of time, a long period of time, in a denialist's eyes, somehow makes it unjustified and makes their argument more solid. To me, this seems so basic. I'm not even sure where to begin in explaining it. The process of taking thousands or millions of years isn't a cop-out to say things not working. Saying God just did it is a cop-out to things not working. Saying years are needed to complete the process is just explaining it. It actually takes a period of time for small changes to even be noticeable. These changes don't happen overnight. It's not that they necessarily take years to accomplish, but rather it takes generations of a species. We have seen it in humans and how much taller we are compared to just a few thousand years ago. That's evolution at work. We have seen it by being able to breed hundreds of generations of fruit flies in a very short time period and been able to see how they've changed and developed over their many generations covered in such a short period of time. Look, right here, fruit fly mutation, 4 million years of evolution. We can prove it. It's demonstratable. It's not a question. It happens. The fact that things take a long period of time is just a scientific fact. It's not just some random cop-out. Evolution is indeed a theory, but it sure as hell ain't science either. Alright, so I already addressed the point of evolution being a theory. Again, not something I thought I'd have to point out, but here we are. And yes, evolution is very much a science. It is a part of biology, which is a science. Again, just because you don't understand the science behind it does not mean it's not a science. Do not mistake your ignorance for a lack of information available. One thing that might help keep things in perspective is that the same theory holds for explaining voluminous variety of plant life. Okay, I can't really address this point as it seems to be more of an argument for evolution than against it. Yes, the reason for such a wide variety of plant life also has something to do with evolution reasoning. Good point. A last point I'll make at this moment is concerning random mutation. And first off, it's not the last point, but let's continue on. Without the hand of God's design at work, a random mutation is almost always harmful to the host. I know. Not without millions of years, right? Again, you got that time cop-out, right? It's that logic that would parallel the example of a blind carpenter randomly nailing planks of wood together that would eventually become transatlantic bridge from Pennsylvania to England. You know, I'm actually surprised that this guy didn't go with a more popular, it's like a hurricane going through a junkyard and magically building a car argument. This is equally fallacious and has been disproven a greater number of times. For example, this guy, who has, well, just listen.
Hey guys, Josh Fierstein here. You know, the other day I had an atheist tell me that I was an idiot, moronic, and stupid for believing in God, that he created this world, because it took way too much faith to believe in a process like that, while he believed in what he called the science of evolution. Well, let's go ahead and let's do this. Dear Mr. Atheist, first of all, let me correct you. Because evolution is not a science, never has, and never will be. Why? Because it cannot fit within the parameters and parentheses of science for one simple reason. It was never observed. That's why.
And he goes on. There's more people than me that have destroyed this guy's. I don't have to address him. He goes into a lot of different evolutionary arguments, and it's really simple. But, as I mentioned earlier, it takes minor mutations, a term I've intentionally avoided in this discussion, to actually create any significant change. These mutations you're talking about are drastic and sudden mutations, such as blindness or a sixth finger. And yes, those mutations usually go nowhere.
All right, guys, thanks for checking that out. Like I said, it kind of ended a little abruptly there, but you got to at least see some of what I was talking about there. Hopefully that clarified certain of the points that we see addressed a lot of the times on these kinds of issues. If not, hey, leave a comment below. Maybe I can get to that as well. Thanks, and this has been The Other Side.